And we're so glad that you're here with us. Wherever you're joining us from, thank you for choosing to spend your time, whether it's live in the webinar or after on UCC's YouTube channel. We're so glad that you're here. I'm Rachel Ward. My pronouns are they, them. I'm the team lead and minister for gender and sexuality justice. And we are here to celebrate UCC Women's Week. This is a time when we celebrate and lift up the rich diversity and expansiveness of women around the world. Advocating for women is critical, especially in this moment. And the injustices that women are facing impact all of us. We hope this conversation today widens the table of inclusion by inviting you to embody women and gender justice year round. And when we say women, we mean the full expansiveness of God's creation. The issues women are facing intersect with so many justice issues. Issues like poverty, racism, bodily autonomy, classism, sexism. The list could go on and on and on. And I'm joined today by three of my wonderful colleagues who work at the United Church of Christ national setting. From across the large swath of these justice issues that women face. And they're here to share their work, their stories, and ways for you to embody this work together. Becca Choate is here, Minister for Global Advocacy and Education. Jerry Warren is here, Minister for Women and Gender Justice. And Tara Barba is here, Minister for Ministerial Support and Accountability. I am so grateful that we're going to be in this conversation together. And if you want, please use the chat to let us know where you're joining us from. We'd love to know. We'd love to see your names. Thank you so much. So let's take a breath and let's take a seat at the table and start with our first question. And it is, why is it so critical that we prophetically show up and advocate for women, especially in this moment? And I'll start with you, Becca.
Thanks, Rachel. I'm so glad to be with you all today in conversation on this because it is an issue, as you said, that covers a lot, right? We find that women disproportionately bear the brunt of all of these societal issues. So whether it's, it's poverty, access to healthcare, access to fair wage and labor things, it's just, across the board, women tend to bear the brunt of that impact. So, particularly now, in this day and age, we've got a lot of things happening in the world, right? There's a lot of conflict, there's a lot of war, there's a lot of pain, and that heavily impacts and disproportionately impacts women and girls specifically. As you hear in the Bible, right? We're all one in the body of Christ, and when one part of the body suffers, we all suffer. So I think it's only right as our calling as Christians to lift up the suffering of our siblings around the world and to work for a just world for all. And that's part of why we're here. Sherry, you want to go next?
Absolutely. Thanks, Becca. It is a critical time in American society as well as society all around the globe. People who are already pushed to the margins are being oppressed and bodies are being legislated at a rate that I have never seen before. I don't know if our governments have ever seen this much legislation trying to tell people how to control their bodies, what they can do with their bodies, how to live within those bodies. And if the UCC doesn't stand up for folks that are continuing to be pushed to the edges, who will? We are absolutely called by our progressive faith to stand with and for folks whose bodies are not counted. When we are all made in the image of God, we all count. And I'm here to help make sure that every single one of us gets counted.
Amen. Amen. I'll just jump in.
Thanks, Tara. I'm so
Good.
sorry. I was
No, that's all right.
distracted by hearts popping up.
Yeah,
Like,
I was
yes,
right
we
there
can
with
do
you.
this.
Right there with you. Yeah.
Thanks, Tara.
Yeah. And really, I'm so grateful to be here with you and with my brilliant colleagues in the ministry. And I'm coming with this question at the intersections, right? We've talked about all of the different ways already that women's issues are not just solely about women, and more than just women should care about women's issues because they intersect with all of the other issues. And with my work in the United Church of Christ, with ministers, with clergywomen, with those preparing for ministry and serving in ministry, and the oversight, it's true here too, right? That the intersection of women's lives, women's issues, justice, wholeness, the flourishing of the church and of society and of the world really is related to how women are treated, how women are valued, how women are allowed, as we said, control of their bodies and decisions, able to live into God's call. And so it's a joy, and it feels like an urgent time to be a part of this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, each of you, for sharing the impact and the moment that we're in, and the prophetic call to be a part of this work. It's so important that we take space and time to even become aware of the types of work within women and gender justice that take place within the United Church of Christ. It's why we have Tara and Sherry and Becca here with us today, so that maybe you all are learning of new initiatives and new advocacy angles that you can participate in. For me personally, to uplift the critical moment and the propheticness of showing up and advocating for women is really, you all touched on it so beautifully, which is what I love about the Spirit and what I love about being in dialogue with my brilliant colleagues. It is every single breath that we take can be utilized in those one-on-one conversations and those small conversations that we have after Sunday in church, with our women's group, in our Bible studies, in the grocery store. We could take 5 seconds longer to share with folks why we care about certain issues and ways to get involved. You will absolutely change lives, and you will absolutely save lives. And that's the prophetic nature of saying yes to advocacy. And it doesn't have to be some massive movement piece where you have to get a lot of people together. Honestly, it can really take place in that one conversation you chose to stay in a little bit longer. That's where the prophetic nature of Holy Spirit and the movement takes place, and something else will ripple from it. Guaranteed, promise. We've all seen it. And so we want to invite you into it, because we can do this prophetic work together. So thank you, all of you, for sharing your personal whys and entry points. Now I kind of want to get into a little bit deeper so that you all can hear about the different ways that we engage this work. So I want to talk about the different intersections of these issues that women face, and how you see that show up in your work, the moments that stick out to you of women empowering women, and also the advocacy taking place against these injustices and seeing justice through. So in the order that we started with, I'm going to start with Becca. I'd love for you to touch on these issues that overlap in your work when it comes to poverty, and how you've seen this work show up, how you've seen people say yes, and the care and the partnerships that we've formed together. Yeah.
Yeah, so poverty is one of those big issues that feels immense and feels really difficult, particularly when you are the person in that situation and you don't have enough money to do all of the things that you need to do. And it can just feel stressful and traumatic and overwhelming. And poverty exists in every single part of the world. It's here in the United States, it's in North America, in Canada, it's in the places we think of as the underdeveloped or developing parts of the world. That's, when you think of poverty, that tends to be the image that people have in their minds is of, oh, it's not here, it's in another country. But that's not true. It is here as well. So when you are thinking about poverty, I encourage you to have that broader global picture in your brain, but also don't forget the people that live next door to you, right? Your actual neighbors, in your neighborhood around you, but in the broader sense of neighbor as well. And so I want to share a little bit about some of the global work in particular, because I work a lot with our global partners around global advocacy. And so there are a lot of partners in every single region of the world in which we have partners that are doing things around what we're calling these days women's empowerment. And economic empowerment specifically. So when we're talking about what does economic empowerment mean, and what does that mean in particular for women and girls, so that's not just the fact that there's more money coming into the house because someone is able to get a job and work. It also means that person has more, probably more education, or at least more knowledge around various pieces of life. They're more, they have more confidence to be out there and to put themselves out there, right? So, women are less likely to be abused when they have some feeling of control over their life. When they have a job, when they have outside income, they're less likely to stay with someone who is abusing them because they have that independent means to leave. So there's that piece of it, but there's also excuse me, when a family has more money, they can send all of their children to school, not just their boy children, which tends to be what happens in a lot of places where those choices need to be made because they don't have enough money to send all of their children to school. So when you have enough money to do that, that means the girls are getting educated as well, which means they're going to have a better shot at doing better for themselves in the future, right? They're not going to be married off as a child. They're going to have, a bigger chance to do something with their lives and be who they want to be, no matter what that is. And they're more likely to have knowledge and control over their reproductive choices as well. So economic empowerment can mean a lot of things. Money in this day and age, in the world that we live in, really does kind of run the world, right? You need money to do things, as much as we would like that not to be the case. So I want to share a story from our partner in Egypt, the Coptic Evangelical Organization for Social Services, otherwise known as CEOS. They're one of our longtime global ministries partners, and they've been doing all kinds of work in the realm of women's economic empowerment. So I want to share a story that we got. It's been a couple of years now, but I think it's still relevant. So we're going to call this woman Miriam. That's not her real name, but she is married. She lives in Cairo, in one of the slums of Cairo. She's married to a man who's from Sudan, so he does not have Egyptian nationality, and they have 2 daughters. So her husband, who does not have Egyptian nationality, was injured at work when he was working, and he became paralyzed. And now, because he's not an Egyptian national, he doesn't get any benefits from the Egyptian state. So therefore, Miriam had to figure out how to bring money into the house to care for her husband, who has serious medical needs, and to care for their 2 daughters as well. So she kind of just started out doing some of that informal labor that we find all too common in other parts of the world and here as well. She went and started working for an elderly woman who needs help around the house. She was doing some housework. She was, just helping out for, some amount of money. That was not a lot. And then this elderly woman was moved into her family's home, so no longer needed that support. So Miriam was again left without a choice. Where does she go? What does she do? She doesn't have any education. She's illiterate. She doesn't know what her options are or her choices are. So she found in the slum an organization that is affiliated with CEOS, one of their projects that they started to help in these types of situations. So when she started working there, so she was getting a salary, they had literacy classes. So she learned how to read and write, which means she could now help her daughters with their schoolwork, where previously she would have to send them to a neighbor or pay for someone else to help them with their schoolwork if they needed it. But she can do that now. And they helped her get her insurance card and national identity card. You know, two very important things that now, if something happens to her, because she has those documentation, her daughters will be supported in the event that something happens to her, regardless of if it was at work or if it was somewhere else. And also, this organization provided training, some vocational training. So she learned how to sew, learned how to use a sewing machine. So now she was also loaned some money by CIAS to go buy a sewing machine for herself. So now she's paying back that loan, but also it's at a, you know, reasonable rate. Of course, it's not an extortionate loan like you might see in some places, including the United States. But she is now able to work from home, so she can care for her husband, she can care for her children at home, and earn some money and make sure that she's helping provide for her family. So it's just a simple thing, right? A sewing machine can make all the difference in the life of somebody, in someone's life. And learning how to read and write can make all the difference in getting that national identity card, getting all this paperwork from the government to get the benefits that she was entitled to. So it's these types of programs. So that's, you know, one specific kind of program. But again, our partners are covering all these types of other intersecting issues. You've got anti-human trafficking programs, you've got agricultural programs, you've got climate change programs, you've got, you know, programs that are serving the people working in the red light district outside US Army bases in South Korea, for example, right? There's all of these intersections that all relate to poverty and all relate to women's and gender justice. So that's, you know, one piece of a bigger issue. And I would encourage you all, if you're curious about this, to go to our Global Ministries website. We've got, as I said, it's in the link is in the chat. Laura dropped that in for everyone. There's a whole wide range of projects that go from, you know, encouraging girls to be more confident in themselves and to give some more continuing education, to do all this kind of really important empowering work. So I'd encourage you to go check all of those out and to see the good work that all of our partners do with support from us in the United Church of Christ. So that's a big piece to it. And the reason we're talking about poverty today is mostly because next week starts the Commission on the Status of Women at the United Nations, and its theme this year is around poverty and the achievement of gender equality by addressing poverty. So that's that's the main reason I'm talking about this today. And I would encourage y'all, if you're interested, the Commission on the Status of Women happens every year at this time of year in March. Last year it happened over International Women's Day, which was nice, but they don't usually do that. It's usually the second and third week in March. But I think I'll talk more about that towards the end. So I'll pass it back over to you, Rachel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becca. I'm so glad that you brought up the Global Ministries page. You can look at all the different intersections and partners that we do this work with. And when you give, we get to continue and do all of this work and support folks just like the story that Becca shared. And if you heard, you also could observe that women's issues impact everybody. You're hearing about, you know, the spouse. You're hearing about kiddos needing the support and needing documentation, and so those kiddos can be supported. You're hearing about the economic impact. You're also, you know, you're hearing about climate impact. Like, there are no issues that women and gender justice doesn't touch. And so that's another reason to have these different conversation partners here today, is so that you can maybe widen the lens view on just how much this overlaps with justice issues. Thank you so much, Becca, for sharing that story. Stories matter. They help us to see how the work widens and takes care of folks. And I'm glad you were able to share that with us. Reverend Tara, I did not add Reverend to your name when I was introducing, and I do apologize. Tara, your work touches so many of these intersections we've already named. And I know you're preparing for the Antoinette Brown Society Clergywomen's Leadership event. And there you're going to engage in intersections of racism, sexism, ministry. I'm curious to hear from you about that work and stories you have, and a call into that advocacy too.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Yeah, the Clergywomen's Leadership event is happening April 16th through the 18th, both in person for authorized clergywomen, ordained clergywomen, and online for those who can't be there in person for all clergywomen or for our members in discernment. And we say Antoinette Brown, and as if everybody knows what that means. And in conversation with the leadership team, it's probably been a couple years now, somebody says, how come if she's the first ordained white woman in mainline Christianity in the United States, why don't we say Reverend Antoinette Brown? Oh, right? Right there. And so we could say, all that and add Reverend and say that she was ordained into the Congregational Church in 1853 and maybe put a period there, right? Say that's a first, and that's a first that we've claimed for a long time in the United Church of Christ, that she's our pioneer in faith and in ministry for clergy women. Well, hallelujah. That's great. And she was a suffragist who advocated for the vote for all women, not just white women. She was a proponent of the 14th Amendment way early. I just learned she challenged Darwin on sexism in his theory of evolution. I mean, she was incredible. And so there's a fuller picture then of who she was, in addition to daring to ask to be ordained, to actually demand to be ordained in the Congregational Church in the 1800s. And so we look to her as this pioneer, and throughout recent history in the United Church of Christ, we've lifted up clergy women and honored them as being excellent embodiments of clergy in the legacy of Antoinette Brown Blackwell. And that in itself is an amazing thing. But a couple of years ago, and I'm relatively new in this role working with the Antoinette Brown Society, in the news, we saw the confirmation hearings of Ketanji Brown Jackson. Maybe you saw a part of those, even just a meme or a few seconds of that interview. Maybe you reacted someone like I did, where my skin kind of crawled and my hackles got up, and I was a bit red-faced at the way that she was being treated, the disrespectful way that she was being treated, the just arrogance and diminishment of her as a brilliant scholar and judicial person nominated for the highest court in the land. And so I was in an Antoinette Brown leadership meeting after that, talking about how that felt. And it was, I think, a quiet voice that says, actually, that's how I've been treated in the United Church of Christ. And it was one of those light bulb moments where, had I thought of it, I probably would have known that clergy women of color, BIPOC clergy women, are treated with contempt, are treated poorly in our churches, in the United Church of Christ, but I hadn't put those pieces together until that moment. And so after that, we discussed, we prayed on, we discerned that the focus, while it had been on clergy women as a whole, that this was a time to really center the experiences of our BIPOC clergy women and really talk seriously about that intersection of race and gender and ministry in the United Church of Christ. And so we shaped our event in 2022 around this intersection. And for the first time, the participants better reflected the diversity of the kingdom, and the Caucasian clergy were in the minority. And it was incredibly powerful and painful and joyous and all of the things, because the stories told were different stories. There were stories through the experience and through the lens and through the voices of our BIPOC clergywomen. And it was a powerful, transformative time to gather together. And since then, we've been preparing for our upcoming event, and it's intentionally in Charleston, South Carolina, where we'll be in part certainly hearing from our clergy awardees, but we'll be going to the International African American Museum that is on pillars above the point of entry of 40% of the enslaved people that came to the United States. And so we'll be continuing to really center this conversation about how race and gender and ministry, how justice and ability to have control of your own person, right, lives even today, so many years from those times when people were enslaved and being imported into the country. So that's a story, right? And the way I connected in too is this sense that we invited someone else into leadership, and their comment was, "Gosh, I thought that was an old white ladies club." And it was another convicting moment that while we have certainly seen maybe the sepia-toned picture of Antoinette Brown Blackwell, and she is, yes, a white woman, we may have lost sight of how beautiful and diverse clergywomen are in the United Church of Christ. So we've changed our ABS logo. You may have seen it, that to better reflect that. And just more recently, I was trying to send out an email to 10,000 clergy colleagues. And the intent was to invite all of our colleagues to consider supporting clergywomen. And I'll get more specific toward the end, but just this general story. In addition to the bounce backs, because 10,000 is way too many emails to send out, I received some comments from our clergy who don't identify as female, who said, "Why did you send this to me? What does this have to do with me? Couldn't you tell by my name what my gender was? Why am I on a girls list?" And it didn't take too many of those for me to really start to get it, that this is last week, right? This is not 1853. And we have a case to make about why supporting clergywomen matters to the whole of the United Church of Christ, and not just to those that identify as female. So that's I leave that story with you as a clarion call about the importance of this work that we do together. Thanks, Rachel.
Yeah, of course. You've uplifted so many pieces. Oh, yes. Yeah, I just want to sit with that share of that being last week. Yeah, what takes place to women in mind, body, and spirit are things that take place to the representation and embodiment of being a man or a non-binary person, a gender non-conforming person, a trans person. These issues overlap with all of us. And society likes to place binaries so that we perform a certain role. But we're not performers. We are in kinship with each other, in relationship and connection with each other. And I'm glad you sent those 10,000 emails so that those questions could come to you and also hopefully be asked within those who sent those questions back to you. Why did I get this email? What is this invitation? And how does this impact me? Because it does. So I'll say that, and then I'll move over to Sherry, because we could say so much about that. Sherry, Women in Gender Justice lives within the Gender and Sexuality Justice ministry team, and our body of work oversees so many facets of everything that we have been talking about here. And one that continues to be in need of advocacy is around bodily autonomy, the personhood of choice with bodies. Can you share more about this work and uplift moments of advocacy stories and how we've seen folks come together for this? Yeah.
I would be so happy to. Thank you, Rachel. And I am just astounded already of the richness of the conversation with my colleagues here and where our work overlaps. As you said, Rachel, a lot of my work in my role as Minister of Women's and Gender Justice focuses around bodily autonomy. And just to make sure people know what that means, that is the right to do what you want with your own body, life, and future. And it is amazing how many people do not have equal human rights around this particular topic. Women's rights are human rights, as my colleagues have made clear. And in the UCC, we try, and definitely within my office and the national staff, we take a very expansive and inclusive stance on who are women. In fact, as I was being interviewed for this position just about 2 years ago, I was asked to define woman. And I was really rather surprised. And I said, you know what? I don't think that's my job to define who gets to call themselves a woman. If somebody wants to identify as woman and work with me on this set of challenges, I am happy to have them by my side. So we often use the word woman. Sometimes we use women with a WOMYN or even an XN to be even more inclusive and symbolize the intersectionality of womanhood. Cis women are women. Girls are future women. Trans women are women. Gender nonconforming people are welcome to hang out with us, as are allies and other folks who want to lift up and address the need for us to recognize that, as Tara said, women in clergy work need to be respected and honored. Women across the globe have a way of seeing and being in this world that needs to be honored. Becca talked a lot about poverty, and one of the areas of poverty that my work addresses that honestly I hadn't even heard of until I was at the Commission on the Status of Women several years ago and went to a workshop on it, this idea of period poverty, which refers to the fact that in many parts of the world, people who menstruate do not have access to the supplies that they need to do so hygienically and respectfully. 22 million menstruating people in the United States alone in the last year suffered from period poverty at some point. And what happens when we don't have access to supplies to take care of our hygiene and menstruation needs is that we miss school, we miss work, we miss out on opportunities that would help us rise to equitable standards with other people in our nation and around the world. So one of the things that I am working on is a menstrual hygiene toolkit for our congregations to be able to use so that they can have events rather like the one that we had at General Synod in July in Indianapolis last year. Phenomenal event where we worked with Church World Services to create menstrual hygiene kits for people who are experiencing transitions, specifically transitions that lead them to be refugees or asylum seekers, living in different kinds of shelters, people who are experiencing natural disasters. And I only learned recently that the Red Cross does not actually provide any sort of menstruation supplies, when they are when they're addressing a natural disaster or some kind of other disaster and providing shelter for folks. So to me, menstrual health is about bodily autonomy and respecting our bodies and giving us dignity and the supplies that we need to take care of them. Some other ways that I also work around autonomy is focusing on gender-based violence and sexual violence, which is disproportionately experienced by women all around the globe. Two of the initiatives that we have within the United Church of Christ, where we have partners that we work with on these issues to bring awareness and advocate against them, is Break the Silence Sunday and Thursdays in Black, both of which you will begin to see more coverage from the United Church of Christ national offices about activities focused towards lifting those up for people to become more aware. I also work on in conjunction with one of my colleagues, Reverend Amy Johnson, who is our Minister of Sexuality and something. She is responsible for the Our Whole Lives program. And I probably wouldn't work as closely with Amy, except for the fact that I have been in Our Whole Lives, or OWL, as we call it, an OWL trainer and facilitator for many years. And so I am very personally invested in the program and the values that it helps clarify for people and gives them the opportunity to do their own thinking about how they want to be in respectful relationship and be responsible with folks. So I'm always beating a UCC drum for Our Whole Lives and encouraging folks in congregations to adopt that set of curricula and use it to the fullest that it will allow them. And I saw a little heart come up. So somebody out there is loving on OWL as much as I am. It is so hard to be a woman. I think about the double standards that we experience as women. And again, I'm going to use that very expansive definition of woman. We are shamed and stigmatized for things that our bodies do naturally, such as menstruation. We are asked to be sexy, but not sexual. We are told that it's sexy and acceptable to have our cleavage show, if we have cleavage, when we are out and about, yet we are shamed when we chest feed our children in public. We're supposed to be feminine, yet tough as nails, which makes me think of that old, it was some cologne where I can bring home the bacon and fry it up in the pan. Oh, great, because I love working all day and then coming home and working a second shift, which so many women do in this nation and around the world. When I have a child, if I have a child, I am expected to lose that weight quickly, but of course not chest feeding my child in public, while if I have a male partner, he gets to develop dad bod and everyone thinks that's pretty cool. So those are just some of the double standards that we experience. And I know you all can name quite a few more. Oh, thank you for putting Amy's proper title in there. I appreciate that. My work focuses me around helping people be proud of who they are, of living out their values, of not being ashamed of what kind of container embodies their beautiful spirit. I have found that I am just so blessed to be able to work for a faith community that allows me to proclaim that encourages me to proclaim that. And most recently, the United Church of Christ's National Ministries, through our office, helped host an event in Texas called Change the Conversation, in which a Christian ethicist spoke out about why reproductive justice is a Christian concept, why abortion is a right for all women or people who need one. And for me, that was taking a real stand. And I'm sorry for the ableist language. That was a very bold move for us to be able to say, this is a right. It aligns with our Synod resolution to denounce the Dobbs decision and declare abortion a healthcare right. And for me to be able to do that, surrounded by people of faith, but very much touching my own faith journey and how I feel about what it means to be a person of faith. I just really can't imagine not having my own faithful values to support me in this work. Thanks.
Thank you, Sherry. Thank you. As you can observe and witness the weaving of the tapestry of this work, there are so many ways that you can be involved in women and gender justice. So many ways. And we've uplifted in these stories moments of injustice that can be reversed by just showing up, and that justice is sometimes a really long journey to get to the moment of liberation, and that it is 100%, in my belief, a practice. It's a practice to get free. And we want to invite you into that practice of women and gender justice right now, in this moment, wherever you are. There are lots of ways to get involved. I'm going to give an opportunity for these beautiful people, these wonderful human beings, to invite you in to widen the table together. They're going to give you tangible ways to show up in this moment. Some of those ways have been linked in the webinar chat. If you're viewing this post-webinar, they're coming to you from the UCC website, the YouTube channel, email, they're there. Visit the Women and Gender Justice page, check out Global Ministries, check out Mesa and what Reverend Tara is overseeing. We will make sure that we get you there. But I'm going to let them share an invitation in a way that you can take action. And then I'll share something from some colleagues, and we'll end our time together today. I'll call on you, Becca.
Great, thank you. Yes, there are numerous things that you can do to get involved. I think the easiest one for a lot of folks is to just donate, right? We've got a lot of great partners around the world and here in the United States who are doing a variety of this type of work, kind of all across the spectrum. So you can go to our Global Ministries Women's Empowerment Projects page, either pick one or donate to that general Women's Empowerment Projects pot. You know, any amount is lovely and amazing and welcomed. You can also go right to ucc.org and donate that way. And so the second piece I would encourage y'all to do is to do some more education. So part of that is attending the UN Commission on the Status of Women, which is starting on Monday. It is a hybrid event, so I will be in New York in person, and Sherry's going to be with me in New York. There's going to be a couple other colleagues who will be there in person, but all of the main UN events will be live streamed to their UN Web TV page, so you can watch all of the official deliberations. But there are also a lot of workshops and events that are put on by the nonprofit NGO community attached to the UN, like the United Church of Christ. And so you can join in those hybrid virtual events through the NGO CSW portal. So that's ngocsw.org. They're the ones coordinating all of those, what is called at the UN civil society events. And so I'm going to invite you specifically next Friday, the 15th, me and Sherry and our UN colleague Donna are working with the World Council of Churches to host a virtual parallel event at CSW all about period poverty and about people on the move specifically. So you'll hear from folks from every single region, their personal stories, what they're doing in their communities. You'll hear from one of our Italian partners as to how they help refugees and migrants who are crossing the Mediterranean, in particular the women who need access to sanitary products and to be themselves and live in their bodies. So that is Friday the 15th at 10:30 in the morning. And if you sign up for the NGO CSW forum, the link for the Zoom will be all in there, and you can see all of the other events that are happening. There are lots of our ecumenical partners, global partners, other faith-based organizations, as well as non-faith-based organizations who are talking about the wide spectrum of global poverty and its impact on women and girls. So you can really learn a lot of things, and it's free to sign up. I want to say that. It's free. If someone tries to charge you for something, don't pay it. I think that's it for me. Thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome. Thank you so much, Becca. I can't highly encourage you enough to take up the ability to be able to view and be a part of CSW from the link that's in the chat and the links that will be accessible with this webinar post. And we're excited for you all to be in that space next Friday and host that conversation. Tara, I'm going to ask you to share some ways that folks can get involved with your work.
Yeah. Well, I focused on the Antoinette Brown event and the Antoinette Brown Society, and there's a webpage on the UCC webpage about the Antoinette Brown Society, and certainly donating there. But I want to back up just a minute and say, my work is support and accountability in the denomination. And so that means that I am deeply involved in the ways that we lift up clergy women and clergy of all sorts and those preparing for ministry. Also, and help with that oversight that happens when harm is done. And so where I wanted to start what you can do is by just taking a moment to invite you to watch and listen, to believe the stories of women, to support where you can and how you can when harm has been done, to stand up for justice for women, for clergy women, for all women, for those who have been harmed by the church in particular. And then to do your own work around racism and sexism and the intersections of all of these isms that we have lived into. It's part of the air that we breathe in some ways. So to do your own interrogation about how do you show up in spaces? How do you decenter the places where you have privilege and help to lift up others' voices? In relationship, in the meetings that you go to, in in the works that you do in your families. How do you lift up the voices that may not have been heard before? And then certainly, how do you show up? How do you put yourself in those places where change can happen? In the churches that you're a part of, in the societies where you live, the places, communities where you live, in our world. Becca has beautiful invitations to being a part of the United Nations work, which is incredible. I would invite you also to support clergy women through the Antoinette Brown Society. We do recognize incredible clergy women. Our honorees this year are fantastic. Reverend Dr. Rebecca Vogel and Reverend Dr. Lisa Goods. They are doing incredible work. So if you know them, reach out to them. Certainly attend our event either online or in person if you fit. And we have an expansive understanding of clergy women as well, that it's certainly invited of cis and trans women, non-binary people who are comfortable in a space that centers the experience of women. That's how we've been using our language around expansion. And then really to reach out to a clergywoman and offer some support, right? Invitation to coffee and, just some way to lift up their work, because the ripple effects you can imagine throughout the denomination, the more that we support each other, the more that we honor each other's stories, the more that we work for justice, the impacts are just incredible. So there are a few ways then that you can be a part of this work. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing. And those links are available for you all in the chat as well. And I'll say, if you want to engage us, if you see something that you feel like could grow or is missing, or a new dialogue piece, we are here to work alongside you and to have those conversations and to see how we can resource together what's needed in the moment. So I want to uplift that as I welcome Sherry to share some tangible ways you can get involved.
Thanks so much, Rachel. I have been working with a couple of congregations in New York State to put together what we kind of loosely call a period pack project, similar to what we did at General Synod in July. And in organizing this, I had to think through some of the things that are maybe less in my skill set, like how to advertise these kinds of things in your community. And as it came to be, we decided that they should announce this around Valentine's Day, because Valentine's Day is so associated with love and the color red, and that made sense to promote things around menstruation when red was a common color to be used, and to give it a good couple of months to work on educating folks about the need, as well as gathering the materials together, and to wrap it up on Easter. Since Easter is so associated with fertility, it just seemed like an appropriate season. But I want to make clear, there is no season that is a bad season for you to have a period pack project in your own congregations. I just looked up, One Great Hour of Sharing is going to be celebrated by many congregations this following Sunday. And in case you're watching this later, that would be on March 10th, 2024. One Great Hour of Sharing. And one of the things that One Great Hour of Sharing supports financially is $250 matching grants for Church World Service menstrual hygiene kit or period pack gatherings. So you can access that through my colleague Craig Hoffman, who happened to email me right before the webinar started to share with me some really fantastic news. The New Hampshire Conference just had its annual conference, and they decided to address period poverty and have a packing party or gathering with a goal of putting together 600 menstrual hygiene kits, and they actually created 700. They beat their goal by 100 more kits, which is just absolutely phenomenal and so exciting. And I know these congregations I'm working with in New York are going to do something similar. I am absolutely thrilled when I walk into a space where there's lines of tampons and pads and laundry sheets so that people can wash things as needed, sanitizer for hands. And I see people of the beautiful breadth of diversity of God's world working together to put those packs together. So you can put together a period party for your community. The toolkit for menstrual hygiene that we're creating will be available very, very soon on the website. And I highly encourage you to apply for those grants. I can get you the link, which I probably didn't actually share with our tech support to be able to plop into the chat. Maybe they'll find it here in a moment. One other thing I want to encourage you to do is to take notice of when there are special Sundays that we have designated for celebrations of certain populations or people, whether that be in the UCC community or broader. This is actually United Church of Christ Women's Week. And we have been lifting up the work and needs of women at so many different levels. It has been an absolute honor to hear from our new General Minister and President, Karen Georgia Thompson, on her thoughts on what we are on the cusp of as far as women's needs, from our new Associate General Minister. All these titles are swimming around in here. Sherry Prestiman, who I believe is online with us today while she is with our colleagues in our DC Advocacy office. Ask your clergy when they are going to celebrate these things. When will they celebrate or honor Break the Silence Sunday, which usually takes place at the end of April? What will you do about Thursdays in Black in your community? Will you have a special Sunday focused on human sexuality or sacred sexuality, and focus on your Our Whole Lives programs? When will you be celebrating Trans Day of Visibility? Hold your clergy accountable for recognizing that these are needs that our communities have. Assume that everyone is present in your space, whether you know they are or not. Be radically inclusive and just assume that every kind of identity is present with you, loving you, celebrating with you, singing with you. Lastly, please go check out Sister Song, which I know they're going to drop in the chat. Sister Song is an organization of women of color who created a framework for reproductive justice that focuses on 4 pillars. And these 4 pillars speak to me directly, and we have resolutions that speak to these pillars of how we all have the right to bodily autonomy, we have the right to have children, we have the right to not have children, and maybe even most importantly, we have the right to raise any children that we have in safe and sustainable communities. And when we recognize those pillars, that opens the door to so much more good work that we can be doing within our communities. So thanks for giving me the chance to talk about things I care about.
Thank you, Sherry. I will uplift that this year and in continuance, a part of widening the offering with Period Packs is to give us a Period Pack Sunday. And that this is the first time announcing it. It will be May 26th. So you will see a kickoff webinar happen at the beginning of May to take you through the toolkit that will show you and kind of teach you why this matters, why we think it matters, how to engage it, how to prep for that Period Pack Sunday. And we're just hopeful that we get flooded with photos and evidence and stories of the church participating in this initiative. I want to uplift our wonderful colleagues. Sherry, you mentioned them. Our UCC Office of Public Policy and Advocacy. We have an office in DC who looks at these issues across all the intersections of the national setting ministries and works and advocates with other faith leaders and interfaith, non-faith leaders as well. And they sent information to us to uplift, and I'm so glad that they did. I do want to answer a question. There's like questions in the queue, and so I think this will answer one of those for the person who was asking about our stance on safe and legal abortion. The UCC has affirmed bodily autonomy and access to safe and legal abortion care for over 40 years. I want to say that again. The UCC has affirmed bodily autonomy and access to safe and legal abortion care for over 40 years. And right now in 2024, we know that bodily autonomy is being legislated and attempted to be legislated in ways that marginalize and disembodies all bodies. One of the ways that the UCC Office of Public Policy and Advocacy is getting involved in that work is fighting, the continued fighting for the codification, what a word, y'all, of the Women's Health and Protection Act. There are some links coming into this chat for you to learn a little bit more about what that is. You can take tangible action by writing your legislative folks and letting them know that you'd like to see that happen. And you can also join the JPAN network. You'll find that on the DC Teams web link, and you can get alerts to take action really easily. Our folks at DC make it super easy for you to take action. You can sign up for that, get those sent to your inbox. I believe that takes place once a month. So I want to say, these are just some of the ways, right? Some of the ways that you can get involved in women and gender justice. Maybe you're not ready to take some of these action steps, but each of my colleagues, including me, are inviting you to just embody and bear witness to the realities of women in this world and the reality that that justice issue intersects with you. No matter who you are or how you feel you embody yourself in the world, this work does impact all of us. Please know that you can reach out to us anytime. We want to hear from you. We want to work alongside with you. We want to hear your stories of the initiatives that you may be starting in your local community or congregation. If your conference is doing something with period packs, we want to hear from you too, so that we can make sure that we have that and share that. Something that I really believe in and matters to me so deeply is if we can model the justice behavior, if we can mirror the humanity of one another, we can give people a roadmap of how to do this well, and we can show up. I hope that for the rest of UCC Women's Week, which if you're watching this post, is currently March 3rd through 8th, and for Women's History Month, which is in the month of March, that you can take up educating yourself, becoming more aware, giving if you can give, and choosing one of these initiatives, or asking questions of other opportunities that you can engage in your community, so that we can make sure that we're practicing freedom and that we're creating moments of liberation together. Thank you so much to my loving colleagues for being here for this conversation today. We appreciate you so much, and we look forward to hearing from you soon. Go in peace and be well.